Excellency, go and read the letter he wrote to World Bank, asking for $82 million to build Kaichi Dam to provide 760 megawatts of electricity. And he wrote it clear. I'm applying for this loan strictly to borrow for this investment to spur growth, economic growth for my country. That was 58 years ago. That facility is still standing. What he borrowed is $82 million. We now owe $120 billion without anything to show for it because we consumed it. It was consumption. There's nothing wrong with borrowing. Every country of the world borrows. No country. Every country of the world borrows. America is the biggest economy. They are owing over 100% of their GDP. The second biggest economy is China. They are owing about 60% of their GDP. The third one is Japan. Japan is owing 230% of their GDP. It can go on and show you. Even Netherlands, that had the highest sovereign wealth fund of 1.4 trillion, Your Excellency, is owing 50% of their GDP. So everybody borrows. The difference is what you use the borrowing to do. Where did you invest it? What did you create? Our own was for consumption. People are borrowing for investment. And I've gone from countries to countries everywhere to show that this is happening. China borrowed. In 1990, 93% to 95% of Chinese people live under poverty. Today, it's less than 2%. India was a similar situation, under 5%. Vietnam was actually 96%. Today, they have less than 3%. So, hours that we have been doing people out of poverty. And just to illustrate to you why borrowing is different here and other countries. I was in Bangladesh in 2010. I've studied 31 countries, comparing them with Nigeria. In Bangladesh in 2010, Your Excellency, they had a GDP of $115 billion with a per capita of $747 per capita. And their debt was $45 billion, 36% of their GDP in 2010. Nigeria, as at then, had a GDP of $375 billion, per capita of $2,250. So we are 3 times Vietnam in terms of per capita, which is a real measure of wealth. And our debt then was $30 billion, less than 10% of our GDP. Today, Vietnam GDP is $340 billion. They've grown by 3 times. Their per capita is $2,050. They've grown by 10 times. Their debt also increased to about $116 billion, which remains even less than 36% because it's now about 32% of their GDP, which means they borrowed more, they invested it. If you go to Vietnam today, the exports, the overseas diaspora fund, everything have increased. Today, Vietnam exports garments, $36 billion, twice what we earn from oil. Garments, they're not just garments. That's what they export. Not something that is sophisticated. And all small businesses, which we're not doing here. And in our situation, our GDP today is about $400 billion. Our per capita, which is a real measure of wealth, is now 1,000, call it 2,000. So we've actually lost about 11% of what we were in 2010. And our debt have gone from $30 billion to $120 billion. So we borrowed about $100 billion, which nobody can explain what was invested. And when, as they say, it's for capital project. If you borrow money and it didn't impact on your GDP, it didn't impact on your capital, you consumed it. That is the crisis we face as a nation. The consequence is that our debt service now is over 90% of our income. In 2001, first 5 months of 2001, Your Excellency, Nigeria as a country made 1,847 billion naira. We use 1,802 to service debts. 98%, only 45 remaining for a country of 200 million people. And we're borrowing more. We said last year our budget was 13.5 trillion. We are going to borrow only 5 trillion. We borrowed 7. This year, our budget plus subsidy and everything will be hitting about 20. They said they are going to borrow only about 6. Your Excellency, we're not going to borrow less than 10. And that is the crisis of us. And what are we even borrowing? With these monies, we are now issuing foreign bonds of 2040, 2045, 26, when we are no longer going to be here. And our children, in the past 1 year, Nigeria has not put 1 naira in the sinking fund. Not 1 naira. So even when you are servicing debt, you're supposed to be saving money to pay the debt. When it matures, we are not putting money there. The crisis is that when we are dead, our children will have nowhere because we've eaten their future. And nobody is talking about that. And we need to move this country in. And there's nothing wrong in this country. It's a country that can be changed. Look at something like Taraba. Look at what is happening all over the world. Today we are struggling with oil, sharing of oil money, who is doing that? Even in America, that is the biggest country in the world, Texas, that is producing several more oil than we are producing. The biggest state in America is California. And what does California do? Texas is not even number 1. They're not number 2. They're number 3. Texas GDP today is 3.4 trillion. 8 times Nigerian GDP. They have no oil. What they're exporting is agriculture and knowledge. Agricultural materials and knowledge. That's all that is making them that thick. Well, we are here fighting over a diminishing access that has since expired. All you didn't say yet is Venezuela. Venezuela have 10 times more oil than Nigerian deposits, and yet they are collapsed. And we're here fighting about oil. No country is talking about oil today. Vietnam, countries and nations have every. Look at the vast land I saw when we are alive here today. I told the people in Niger, you have 76.3 square kilometers of land in Niger State. Your Excellency, they can't feed themselves. They can't feed Nigeria. They don't export anything. The other one is natural. When you deal with natural one, because people have means of livelihood, you deal with support to your security agencies, which is renewable every year. And with this, you generate more money. Every day, Your Excellency, we say in this country that we don't have revenue. We don't have revenue. Even when government said the revenue to GDP is too low, it has to be low. Because you have millions of people who are not doing anything. The more your people are doing something, the more your economy is productive, the more revenue you generate. You can't generate revenue from people who are not doing anything. It's a simple thing. It's been done everywhere in the world, and it's very easy, Your Excellency. It's not a question. If you go, and where do you generate the most revenue? In your youth, the young ones, in their productive age. You have to invest in them. And what do they need? They need access to capital and training. They have the idea. They can change the world. It's not a sophisticated thing. Nigerian youths are talented. All they need is support. And it has to be government-determined support. It's happening in China. If you go to Indonesia, they have a particular number of their loans that go to small businesses. What changes the country is small corporations, nothing by